You are expected.
Please assume the position.
Battlestar Galactica Deadlock is a strategy game set during the First Cylon War, making it a sort of prequel to the great Battlestar Galactica reboot series. You play simply as the Commander, the tactically adept but suspiciously mute second-in-command of the entire colonial fleet. Stationed aboard the Daedalus, you and your crew have to drive back the Cylon attack, all while herding the gaggle of cats that is the Quorum, the alliance of 12 colonies funding the fleet that is seeing to their defence. When they aren't too busy quarrelling among themselves, of course. Mechanically, the game is very solid. The campaign sees you controlling the various colonial fleets, jumping from colony to protect them from the relentless Cylon forces. The battles take place in a 3D space environment with simultaneous turns. Unsurprisingly, your goal is to send those chrome bastards back to that god they're always waffling on about. But you're given plenty of tools to take care of the job. Across the campaign, you can research and develop a nice variety of ships. Each has their own stats and abilities, such as the capacity to launch fighter wings, specialised munitions, and flak fields. Combined with the Colonial's ability to shift around ship postures, this can lead to a decent variety. Where you position your ships in battle is of vital importance. Every ship has its own armour and weapons, which can seriously influence where you need to position your ships. Armour protects from directional damage. Once it's chipped away, your ship's health will begin to deplete, and once it reaches 0, your ship is destroyed. So it's a good idea to angle yourself so you've got your most protective elements towards the enemy, and swivel around or change altitude once your armour gets too low. You also have to worry about your own weapons. Each ship has its own suite of batteries to manage, from light turrets and flak fields to massive Battlestar armaments, which will absolutely shred the enemy. All these too will influence your positioning, because the various batteries have firing arcs and optimal distances. These factors all combine to form a very robust core of decision making on the battlefield, influencing your fleet deployment, movement and tactics. For example, you're going to be a lot better off gunning it straight towards your enemy with your Battlestars, with their heavy frontal armour and aggressively positioned batteries, than you would with a ship only capable of broadsiding. A lot of ships are going to be able to utilise that special ammunition I was mentioning earlier. Some ships are even specialised around their use. As always with these kinds of things, it's pretty inevitable you're going to have some that are more useful than others. I mean, what would you rather have? Some launched proximity mines that after a turn of setting up will cause some area denial and some ship damage if an enemy happens to wander into it, or the old Oppenheimer special? Turns out there's a right choice. One of the problems with the ammunition is that beyond the core 3, they're all sort of niche in their applications, and you're not going to know if in any given mission they are going to be useful, so you just never end up taking them. Still, the variety on its own is quite nice, and it gives you a chance to experiment. There's certainly a lot of combinations you could make. Fleet composition is limited by 2 factors. No matter what you do, you cannot command more than 7 vessels in a single fleet. Second, each ship also comes with an associated points value. In battle, your ships can fill a number of different roles, from light scouts to dedicated carriers or gunships, all the way up to the mighty Battlestar. As you can guess, the bigger the ship, the more points it's going to cost you, but also the more effective it will be in battle. It's worth noting here that when an officer levels up, he has a choice in a few different skill trees, but at no point did I value the other trees over just getting more ships in my fleet. And on the occasions that I did, just to experiment a bit, while I did feel the difference, I think I would have felt the difference of bringing another Battlestar more. I do think it's actually quite a good system, as designing your fleets around these point limits does warrant some consideration. While the bigger ships are generally better, filling up that last space in points value with 2 cheaper ships may yield something more flexible and interesting while presenting multiple new targets to the enemy. By the endgame, I had fallen into what I found to be quite a comfortable fleet structure. The thing is about the base star, that their primary method of attack is missile bombardment, and they don't have much in the way of traditional ballistic weaponry. All colonial Battlestars, on the other hand, as well as some other ships, can produce flak fields, which can totally nullify incoming missiles from a single side. So if you just circle around the Cylon forces, the base stars can't actually do all that much. If you set your Battlestars to maximum offensive posture, they will be able to deal out enough damage to keep whatever the enemy's got at bay. Add a couple of Atlases for more fighter support, and a Manticore with maxed out defensive posture to see half the goddamn map in radius, and you're sorted for whatever they throw at you. Of course, this was only my preferred build, the one I use for the story missions. But there are others, and I would highly recommend implementing some variety into your fleets. You're going to be fighting a number of battles, much more than just the core story. And if all your fleets feel very samey, and are using the same tactics, that can end up making for quite a repetitive experience. So go out of your way a little to implement some variety, and that can help a lot. It is an issue compounded somewhat by the fact that it is almost always your goal to destroy all Cylons present in a mission, one way or another. Only in very specific missions where you're given a particular objective, such as destroy satellites, can you get away with using hit-and-run tactics. And these are far too infrequent to really justify building fleets around the concept. So instead, you're all but forced to design fleets around the idea of wiping a map clean of enemy threats, which is a bit of a shame because it can feel a bit restrictive at times, as you're always going to want to bring something that packs a punch, even if in reality you can get away with quite a lot of different builds. Beyond the battles themselves, there are 4 systems to worry about and their colonies. The colonies are your main priority. The preservation of human life in the face of extermination, after all, is the most important thing. It's totally incidental that they're also your bank and are funding you. If a colony is blockaded by Cylons for too long, they can withdraw their support from Colonial Fleet. Admiral Kane does not like that, so she can send a fleet with an officer attached to renegotiate their participation back into the Alliance. Beyond that though, if you fail enough colonies, the game is over. So it is critical to actually protect them. To do so, you can station a fleet in orbit at all times, fortifying them, which ensures their loyalty to the cause. And their safety, I suppose. While it is of course very important to look after them, it's not overly complicated. Ensuring you have one strong Battlestar group per system is generally enough to see to their safety. You do have the option to auto-resolve these battles if you're not feeling like saving the civilians that day and would rather delegate. There are also these special missions, which offer bigger rewards for completion. They're on a timer, meaning you've got to be snappy if you want to complete them. However, they are infinite and will keep respawning. Picking one up every once in a while helps, but don't fret if you're missing out on them. And of course, like a lot of strategy games, there is a veteran system. As you complete missions and get kills, your ships will level up. This will give not only specific benefits to different ships, but also improved subsystem strength, allowing for better maneuverability, firepower, and defences. It's a bit of a shame then that I never gave a damn about the fighters. You get a load of different types to choose from, depending on what you want to do, but they don't gain experience, and they never developed anything close to the sort of presence a capital ship does. So there was absolutely no perceivable consequence of just throwing them into the fray and using them totally expendably. The story is pretty decent too. I like the characters, but in keeping with your role as commander, you are in quite a lot of ways a passive entity in the whole scope of the war. You're there to follow orders and manage things primarily on a tactical level. Being a silent protagonist, the story is delivered to you through briefings and conversations others are having while on the bridge, you never serving as an active participant. But there are actually quite a few interesting moments and ethical dilemmas through the story, but you never actually engage, just observe. My only issue with the story has nothing to do with its content, but instead is to do with how the story is delivered to you. A story mission obviously advances the story. Swept up into the desire to play the damn game, you can move your fleet to a mission marker and miss the pre-mission briefing, which explains why you're doing what you are doing. If you want the briefing, you've got to click on the mission before moving a fleet there. So you have to be mindful of not accidentally skipping things that can give greater context. On my second playthrough, I was much more aware of this issue, and paid special mind to making sure I didn't miss anything, and I do think that improved the story a bit. As for the DLC, it's also pretty solid, but I don't feel it is essential unless you're interested in the story. It's broken down into 2 seasons. Season 1 feels a lot like the main game. If you own Broken Alliance, you can actually play it alongside the base game by selecting that from the menu. You'll get access to the new ships and munitions as you move through the DLCs. For Season 1, you'll get more of what you've already got, basically. Season 2 does change some things on the strategy layer. I can't say for sure what was going on in the developers' heads. Maybe they felt like seeing to the safety of the individual colonies was a bit tedious, or perhaps it just didn't quite fit into the narrative they were looking for the second season. But whatever the reason, what we're left with is a really slimmed down version of Season 1, at least on the strategy layer. All you've got to do here is manage Cylon threat levels, keeping them down by launching out on these randomly generated missions in between the story missions. If you let them get out of control, you're prevented from progressing in the story, and that just feels kind of frustrating. It's clearly an attempt to slow things down, because in Season 2 you can jump your fleets to wherever they need to be in a single jump, meaning you could absolutely gun the main story if you wanted. But if all it was exclusively main missions, you maybe couldn't be taking advantage of the levelling up of ships, and trying new fleet compositions, or indeed employing any new ships to see what they're like before going into a story mission. In the end, is it a downgrade? Maybe. But I don't think it's a deal breaker by any means. If you enjoy the battles, which really are the core of the game, I cannot really see this being a serious issue, but you should know that that difference exists. You will also get a whole new crew and story spanning that second season, and although the story had what I considered to be the worst parts, it also had some of the best and most interesting moments of the whole campaign. Operation Anabasis is a standalone DLC, and I was a bit surprised to see it has mixed reviews on Steam. I certainly had fun with it. It's kinda themed like the show. You're trying to safely escort a group of civilian ships from the outer colonies back behind the Red Line after a failed attempt to assassinate Cylon leadership. It's basically a battle after battle kind of thing. You've got to hold out until your FTLs are all fired up, and you're ready to jump and start all over again. But it isn't always the best idea to jump out as soon as you get the chance. If you stick around a bit longer, weathering the assault, you can get a better picture of what you're jumping into next, which can really help inform your decision. While there are opportunities to repair, they are infrequent, and using a currency that is far, far rarer than what it is in the base game. The effect this has is that you are fighting attrition as much as you are the Cylons. I found myself really caring about whether or not I should use munitions, and whether or not to commit fighters to an engagement, because I didn't know if there was going to be a chance to replenish them anytime soon, although you are given a support ship that can help with that. You can create any fleet you want, but the smaller it is, the better score you'll get at the end. My only issue with it is that the Cylon fleets are randomly generated, although in general they tend to get harder as you progress. However, you can still just be ambushed by an obscene enemy presence, and it would also be quite nice if the battles could go a little differently. I don't think it would be an unreasonable request to add some missions that allow for resource gathering, or destroying an important target that's maybe preventing you from leaving. After all, they have that sort of thing in the base game already. You'd only have to include it every once in a while to keep things fresh, and add a little variety. But even with that in mind, I found the mode quite enjoyable. In initial drafts of this script, I used the phrase very solid, or variations thereof, about 74 times. And that's because it's a very succinct way of describing this game. Very solid. You sit down to play this, and you know what you're going to get. Enjoyable capital ship 3D space combat set in the Battlestar Galactica universe. And it reliably delivers. The story is very solid, with enough engaging characters and interesting events to keep the viewer engaged, even if it can be delivered in a sort of painful way sometimes. Very solid, light grand strategy elements, which work really well through the base game in Season 1, and threat management elements present in Season 2. Very, very solid fleet composition, variety and combat. Everything it sets out to do, it does, and it does well. Where it falls short, aside from the little issues around fighters and some redundant options, is that it doesn't step too far out from that core experience, leading to what can feel like some repetition. And although there is variety in the mission objectives, they all end with destroy the toasters, which again can contribute to a very samey sort of feeling across missions. But even with those little issues recognised, it's hard to deny that this is a damn fun game. For more than just Battlestar Galactica fans, I think.
45 up to 6. I'm targeting. Frack! I'm winged! They're giving us a hell of a storm, sir. Switching gun to manual.